All right, so next I want to talk about a feature in Excel called conditional formatting, and I'll actually give an example for why it can actually be pretty useful. So let's go ahead and take a look at this scheduled day column. And we see that within this column, there is, of course, the date. So in this first row here, we have 2016, April 29th, but we also have a timestamp. And we see there's actually quite a few of these appointments on the 29th. So let's imagine we want to find all the patients in this data sheet that came in on April 29th, 2016. So we would think, based on what we just learned a moment ago, that we could potentially use filters to solve this problem. But what we'll see is if we try to use a filter, there's actually more than one entry for a given date. So for example, if we're interested in January 5th, we see there's actually more than one January 5th. And same thing for January 11th, there's multiple entries. And because the timestamps, there's so many timestamp variants for a given day, that's why we're seeing multiple entries within the filter list. Now, one thing you could potentially do is if you wanted, say, all the patients for January 1st, you could, of course, just use the pick list and just manually go in there and select them. But you can imagine in some circumstances, especially if you have a lot of data, that this really won't be feasible. There'll be too many to click. You don't want to go in here and click on 1,000 of these pick list items to sort of get your entire data set. So another way to get around this is this feature called conditional formatting. And really what conditional formatting does is it allows you, based on certain conditions, such as it has to be equal to a certain number, greater than a certain number, contain a piece of text, or exactly match the entirety of a piece of text. Based on those conditions, you can actually go in and highlight cells within Excel. So it makes it very easy to identify cells that match one of your criteria. So let's go ahead and actually do this for this particular data set. I'll start by highlighting this particular column. So I'm telling Excel I'm interested in specifically highlighting column D. And then we'll make sure we're on the Home tab over here. And then we'll click on Conditional Formatting right here. And next we're going to highlight, or just put a cursor here on the highlight cell rules option. And then to the right of that, this is what I was talking about in terms of the criteria. So we see there's a greater than option if you have like a number, less than, between. In our case, we want to specify April 29th, 2016 without the timestamp stuff. So we want sort of like a part, we want part of the cell to be identified essentially. So what we're going to use is this text that contains. So if the text contains that date, then it would highlight it, even if it has timestamps after it. So we're going to go ahead and click here, text that contains. And in this box over here, we're going to actually enter our date of interest. So following the format that they have, we'll hit 2016-04-29. And as soon as we do that, we'll notice it actually highlights in red every single appointment that contains that bit of text, that 29th text, even though it has timestamp stuff after it. So at this point, what we've done, we've made it really easy to identify patients that have this particular date, scheduled date on there. But there's also a bunch of other patients here too. What if we wanted to distill this down and get a subset of the patients that are specifically in red? Well, the way we would do this is we would add on top of what we just did with conditional formatting, we would add filters on top of it. So, and this is very similar to what we did a moment ago in the filters section. So we'll go ahead and click on this filter right above schedule date. And we'll notice under this filter section, there's this by color option. So we'll click on this drop down. We'll choose cell color, and we'll notice that actually this rose color comes up automatically. So we'll go ahead and select that, and what you'll see is as soon as we do that, especially if you look at the left here, you'll see it's filtering out everything that is not red. So now we have a distilled list of patients that are specifically coming in on April 29th. And just a cool feature I just wanted to show you here is if you actually highlight the patients, if you highlight the column here, so we have every single row identified. If you look on the right hand side here at the bottom, it actually gives us a count of how many rows has been identified. So this number that we're seeing here, just to give context, is excluding everything that's being filtered out. So for example, as we learned before in terms of clearing filters, if we go to the data section over here, if we click on that and we click on clear to get rid of our filters, what we'll see is our count will actually increase. So we'll click on clear. I'm going to go ahead and highlight this column again, and now we see, the entire data set, which is over 110,000 rows. So that's sort of a quick trick I just added there at the very end of this section, is how you can sort of get counts of patients really quickly in Excel after you've done your filtering. So that's really helpful if you're trying to understand how many patients are in a given subset. After you've done all your filtering, you can just highlight that column, and then Excel will give you a count. And then on top of that, if you want other metrics as well, you can also right click on it, and there is some level of customizability. So if you're sort of highlighting a column with numbers, you can actually customize what numbers, what statistics it actually gives you by right clicking. So you have that level of customizability there.